through a series of events, a stranger in New York at 2 a.m. opened up her door to me and, welcomed me in. And for the first time, I heard three words I had never heard before. Your life
Mm.
matters,
Wow.
and yeah. And I was like, huh. And the next day when I saw the car was an accordion,
Mm.
and the guy in the junkyard said, "Hey kid, were you driving this car?" And I was like, yeah. I was like scared. I was like, yeah. And he was like, there's no way you could have gotten out of this car. And the
Mm.
truth is, I don't remember getting out of the car. But what I
Mm.
do remember was that lady's voice the night before saying, your life matters,
Mm.
and that was the night I stopped drinking, I stopped doing drugs, and I never went back. And I was
Mm.
like, I've now got to figure out, because now all of a sudden I had this sense of purpose. I was still a kid. I still made
Yeah.
a ton more mistakes,
Mhm.
but there was this feeling that my life was leading up to something, or I was here for a reason.
My Inner Knowing, empowering you to find your compass for the journey. We are dedicated to supporting you to rediscover and trust your natural ability to navigate life each day by sharing insight and experience through the lens of two professional communicators and their guests. We intend to prompt internal inquiry that supports all those willing to explore a unique path.
Well, hello, Hal. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah,
Hi,
thanks.
Hal.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Yeah.
Yeah, so just by way of introduction, today we're speaking with Hal Eisenberg. Hal is a licensed master social worker in New York State, as well as a licensed school building leader. He's certified by the New York State Department of Education to provide violence prevention training to professionals under Project SAVE, and has been awarded numerous awards by the city and by the borough of Queens. So Hal also is involved internationally in education programs and has at his core a view that the world becomes a healthy community through higher consciousness education. He's crosses the globe educationally, and it's fascinating what you bring to students across the world. And also, he's the author of 5 books, working on the 6th.
Mhm.
One is a series called Beautiful Souls, a 4-book compendium that follows a journey of a Scott Matheson, a young man searching for purpose, love, and meaning in the midst of life's challenges.
Yay.
And Whispers in the Rain, which I'm very interested in picking up and reading. And then 101 SEL Things to Do, which is social emotional learning, which is tied back to your interest in, I think, changing and improving the way the world educates our future.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually forgot about that last book.
Oh, so 6 working
So
on
it is
7.
6. Yes.
How do you find time to do all of that?
That's a really great question. Honestly, I never thought I was going to be releasing books, but I think part of my spiritual practice as I was, navigating my own wounds and my own healing journey was through writing in journals. And, ever since I was, 16 and I was, kicked out of my home and I was homeless, I had a steno pad, and I'm dating myself, steno pad, no computers, no Word doc, just a, pen, paper, and my truth. And I would just write. And that's kind of how I was guiding through all these thoughts and feelings and emotions. And eventually those writings became books and
Mm.
became my expression. And at some point there was a crossover that I wanted to share my experience with others who I saw were struggling, with different parts of their journey. And I was like, oh, wait, I was there. Like maybe I could, pass some of my experience on to you, to help guide you, wherever you're at to get to the next step. And that's where the idea of releasing books came.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my mindfulness bell, Hal. Sometimes it goes off when we're in here, and sometimes I
Mm,
sit on my phone. so it doesn't make so much noise, but
And now we're all
I
present.
love you
now
guys.
we're all present, right?
I love you guys. I love your energy.
Well, I'll sit on it for the next time it goes off. There we go.
I was so in the zone, I didn't even hear it. It's all good.
It's so funny. Well, thank you for sharing some of your story, Hal. Obviously, we met before, but we didn't get into your story. So are there other things that you want to share about that part of your journey as a young man?
Oh yeah, wow. I mean, the 4 book series, Scott Matheson is basically me.
Mhm.
And it was this journey. It's really interesting because I have the 4 book series and I have Whispers in the Rain. And how I really explain the difference between the two is the 4 book series was written from my pain. Just all this hurt, where Whispers in the Rain was written more from my healing, from a healing perspective. So both books have a different energy. So when I look at Scott Matheson, when I look at that kid, he was hurting, he was lost. He came from an abusive household and he didn't know who he was, and the things that he was seeing out in the world didn't make sense. The world was really, really loud, and he had this inner knowing, not to steal your words, but he had these inner thoughts and this impact, but it wasn't aligning with what the world was saying. So he was reacting to everything. And the whole time, all this kid wanted was to feel love. So the book takes him on a journey through the pain and some of the unhealthy choices he made, drug addiction and car accidents and broken relationships, and each one taught him something and helped him to grow to the next step, where eventually by the end of the book series he gets back to understanding that the love was always there, and it was inside himself. And he had to stop blaming everyone else, making everybody else the villain, and making himself the victim. There's no villains and victims in this world. It's just awareness and experience. So that's the gist of the Beautiful Soul series. And I can get into the nooks and crannies. I almost died at 17. I drove my car into a concrete wall. I was on drugs. I was drinking. Um, Through a series of events, a stranger in New York at 2 a.m. opened up her door to me, and welcomed me in. And for the first time, I heard 3 words I had never heard before: "Your life matters."
Wow.
And I was like, "Huh." And the next day, when I saw the car was an accordion. And the guy in the junkyard said, "Hey kid, were you driving this car?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like scared. I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "There's no way you could have gotten out of this car." And the truth is, I don't remember getting out of the car, but what I do remember was that lady's voice the night before saying, "Your life matters." And that was the night I stopped drinking, I stopped doing drugs, and I never went back. And I was like, I've now got to figure out, because now all of a sudden I had this sense of purpose. I was still a kid. I still made a ton more mistakes, but there was this feeling that my life was leading up to something, or I was here for a reason, and I needed to figure out what that path was.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you believe in divine intervention, Hal? I mean, that sounds like one of those instances, but we interpreted those in different ways. What do you think?
Yeah, I've read so many stories about divine intervention. 100%, but not in the cinematic. I didn't see a light. There was no stairs. There was no voice that said, "Go back, go back." And not to say that other people's experiences that have that type of divine intervention, isn't true. I think there's a lot that we don't know about the next, levels, or dimensions, as some people like refer to. but yeah, no, I do 100% believe there's divine intervention in once, and I actually feel like it might even be ourselves. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot there's a higher version of ourselves that are is guiding us simultaneously. And I think we come here, we forget everything, for the purpose to expand ourselves. We're supposed to remember love. We're supposed to have these challenges. I know some people like who don't have those spiritual beliefs will say, I didn't choose to get beat by my parents. I didn't choose to,
Yeah.
get raped, and I didn't choose, X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
So that's where that area gets really gray and muddled. But I do think we choose to come back so that we could remember this, remember who we are. And in remembering who we are, I think that's what expands in the universe. There's something beautiful about that energy and that flow. And I'm still figuring it out, but that's
Yeah.
kind of where my path and journey takes me. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, it felt like divine intervention in the moment. And I've had many divine intervention
Yeah.
type of moments that weren't just like boom, shock. It was, the whole journey feels like a divine intervention.
I really like that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
That is
Yeah.
funny.
I'm interested in the villains and victims
Mm.
comment that you made.
Yeah.
And I think that what I'm interested in when you have the challenges that you've described, and you haven't gone into great detail, and that's fine, but kicked out of home at 16, you go through this, path of, whether we suffer abuse and neglect or, we're abandoned and all those things. Some of those are common, some are more extreme than others. But when you experience that at a young age, I think it's easy to view the world as villains and victims.
Oh yeah.
And the question for you is this: when you said it earlier and you said there is no such thing, I'm wondering what point in time was it that you realized that, and how did you come to that realization?
I was hanging out with this amazing girl who was just awakened my soul, like really, really awakened my soul to this deeper spirituality, this deeper internal awareness of who I was. And she read the first draft of Beautiful Souls,
Mm.
and she had pointed out that there was a pattern in my relationship. She was also like my teacher and my mentor, and had invested in who I was. I was at this crossroads in my life. I had all these successes, and I was burning out. I was trying to figure out what the next steps in my life were. And she made this comment. She was reading about one of my relationships in the book, and she said, that sounds like me. And it wasn't about her. She goes, please don't make me the next villain in your life.
Mm.
And she's like, no matter what happens, just don't make me the next villain. And that was like this big awareness that I was like, wait, what does that mean? Do I do
Mm.
that? And then I realized that, I think that was the first time that I realized that this book was my cleansing. This was my pain. And that I had villainized everybody. I had been like, it's me against the world, right? It's like I blamed my parents, I blamed my sibling, I blamed, everyone was, and that's when I started like really seeing that everyone's on their own journey, and everybody loves based on where they're at, how much they can love, how much they comprehend love based on the lessons that they're learning, because their divine intervention is the same thing. They're on this path of remembering, right? So just because they're remembering at a different place than I'm remembering doesn't make either one of us, better or worse. It just makes us at a different place. So why should I blame them for my not understanding that, or them not understanding that? Like we're all just here trying to figure it out. And I think that's the point. So I think it was that moment I started looking at the stories. And now, even now, when I go back and I reread Beautiful Souls, and I made a lot of mistakes with that book series, so now I'm working with a publishing company now that's re-releasing it with some, extra material, and we're getting this book right finally. This will be the third edition of this book series, but I'm really excited about it. But now that I reread it with all the newer lessons, being a little in a different place in my journey, I think if I had to rewrite it again, I would rewrite it completely differently, because I see the pain. I see the victimization of like, oh, woe is me, like poor me. Why can't I have what I want? Being very attached to outcomes was a big part of my journey and my lessons, right? And now I'm not attached to outcomes. I'm really focused on just being present in the moment wherever I'm at, and that's enough. It's enough just showing up and breathing. I don't need everything that society says you need for success or happiness or love. It's right here. Yeah. I don't know if I answered the question. I tend to go off on rants, by the way, if you haven't noticed.
It's all good. Yes.
It's fascinating. I mean, I think, sorry, Pam, I'll just step out of the limelight here. I got all fired up when I read all this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about myself in context of what you're saying, and I'm wondering if I still am, in a space of some needing of the villain. Okay. And I think we can be in that space where we believe that we need the villain to be able to function, or it's motivating somehow, or whatever it is. But I think ultimately that, the path that you've taken where you drop those, you drop the need for labeling those roles or recognizing those roles, is where I want to be too. So thank you for the wisdom. Yeah.
You're welcome. It's funny, as you were saying that, what popped up, I think it's also important to say, I think we need the villains because of contrast. We need contrast to learn the lessons, right? You can't know light unless you know dark, right? You can't really know love unless you know what it feels like to hurt and have that pain. But that's the dichotomy, the beauty of our journey. I went through so much pain with my parents, but I love them. I don't villainize them anymore, and it doesn't change what happened. Right. I just see it now as, okay, that was an experience, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting when you were saying that, Baben. What I think about is I don't think it's real, but a sense of power that you can feel if there's a villain, because then my energy gets to go towards something out here, right? As opposed to what is happening in here.
Yeah.
Are you saying as a way of not having to look in here?
Yeah.
Avoidance again? Come on.
Yeah, I can relate to that for sure.
I'm a trial lawyer.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Hal, I'm having an existential thing going on today.
I'm here for you, man.
That's good too.
That's good too.
Thanks. All right.
Like it's somebody who's always looking for the villain as a trial lawyer, right?
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah. Fascinating.
Well,
we can talk about
it. I don't remember who I was listening. I like to study a lot of, thought leaders, and I watch random videos, and, YouTube has an algorithm now where, you watch whatever video and then they send you 700 thought leaders. Right? And I read something where I'll use it in terms of villains, but what if we reframed it and we saw the villains as the teachers, right? Their purpose here is to educate us so that we can get to the next journey. It's very easy to say, "Oh, you hurt me, and how dare you?" And I'm gonna, my problems are because you did X, Y, and Z to me. Well, part of that spiritual awareness now is, okay, thank you for doing that to me, because you just taught me this amazing lesson. It's like heartbreak, put it in terms of love. It would be like, oh my God, you left me. I'm so hurt. And yes, those feelings are validated and real. But in the same breath, you can say, wow, like, yeah, I had that heartbreak and it opened me up and it taught
Mhm.
me all these amazing things. And thank you, in that hurt, in that pain, in that victimization, in that villainizing, I learned who I was. I learned to
Mm,
go inside. I learned something simple like putting my hand on my heart and
Yeah.
taking, a couple of deep breaths and getting presence. If I didn't have heartbreak, I would have never looked for that answer.
mm,
I Whispers in the Rain was partially born from losing people in my life and also being diagnosed with cancer, right?
mm.
So in that cancer journey, yeah, oh my God, I get diagnosed with cancer. I can play the victim role. Oh
Yeah.
my God, I'm dying. And there were moments, absolutely, because it's a roller coaster. But cancer taught me so much.
Mm,
It forced me to get present, and not play victim, but not play, but find hope.
mm,
Find hope and find answers. And uh, it awakened me to so much more internally knowing like who I am. So
mm,
I say thank you to the villains. Yeah.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Just thinking about, my own process, how of growth, when I was always looking for the person who was going to tell me who I was.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And then I was always disappointed. And then, in an attempt to deflect from my inability to see myself, then they were bad.
Hmm.
Then, at some point, there was a shift in me where I was like, you need to stop throwing away the teaching because the teacher is human too. And um, then realizing after that that every person is a teacher for me if I choose to see it that way.
Yeah.
Painful or not, right? Because
Absolutely.
I can learn so much from watching people who have a freedom that I don't have
Yeah.
or can access joy in a way that I'm still working on.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think for me, and I don't know if this is kind of what you're saying, so please confirm or not confirm. But I think for me, I used to look for that external validation, even in my relationships, and I still do to a certain extent. My friendships, my romantic relationships, it's like this outpouring of love. That's part of my love language. I love to give gifts. I love to do, but there's this external validation piece, that was always like, oh, if I do all these things, they're going to label me what I need to hear. Like,
Mm,
I'm amazing, I'm awesome. I need that, like, I need that back. So I'm going to be the most amazing man in the world. Not that I wasn't, but that's truly, I try to show up as the best version of myself. But
right.
the disconnect was I was attached to needing that validation,
Yes.
and that spiritual mentor was like, you're okay for just showing up and breathing. You don't
Mm,
need to be anything else. You just need to show up. And I was like, I couldn't understand that. I was like, no, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I show up and breathe. But by the way, he has 700,000 gifts, or I'm going to show up and do all this work, but that was part of the lesson, right? We don't need that external validation, right? Because it is really showing up. But to learn that lesson, I had to I had to lose connections. I had to lose important people in my life, because I didn't realize that the way I was showing up was pushing them away.
Yeah.
when I was trying to do the opposite, it was like, hold on, but you hold on too tight, you're going to lose that grip. So and I didn't need to hold on tight. I just needed to be me,
Yeah.
but that's okay too, because like it's part of the journey. They were great teachers to me,
Mhm. Mhm.
so it's okay to love and release and say thank you for showing me that.
Yeah. Oh, so hard that work when we
So
struggle so much with trying to make sure we're not abandoned, then to step into knowing that if I choose myself and I learn, if I stop giving all these gifts, will I be abandoned?
right. Right.
Mhm.
And the funny thing is, I'm saying this now like super confidently, and I'm on your podcast, and I'm like, yes, I'm going to come across like this really great spiritual whatever, person that's like dispersing all this knowledge from my experience. But the truth is, I might get off this podcast and loop again.
Mm.
I might fall back into that pattern because we're so conditioned in society to still want that validation, to still want to, show up a certain way. So it's a muscle, and it's practice. The difference now is I'm just more present when it happens. I'm more
Yeah.
aware of it. I know before before I call it before and after screen time. Like, 'cause screens seem to be dictating our life. I make sure I put my hand on my heart, and I
Mm.
and I breathe at least 10 times. Sometimes it's, five, sometimes it's once, just to get present, like back in my body. I
Mhm.
learned that as part of my practice, because those patterns will continue to show up no matter how aware we are.
Yeah. You mentioned the hand on the heart.
Yeah.
What other things, how do you practice that help you, get grounded again or find yourself again? Like, what's helpful for you?
Nature. I
Mm.
I love I love nature. Nature speaks to me.
Mm.
I'm definitely one of those tree huggers for sure. uh, and music. I
Mm.
love I love my music. Like,
Mm.
music is the language of the soul. I play drums. I've been in a band for 27 years. The same group of people, and they've
Mm.
they've become like my chosen family. I'm now dabbling in original music, which is super exciting for the first
Mm.
time in my life. The band I was in for 27, we've done covers,
Sure.
so yeah, I'm dabbling, in original music now, which is super exciting. A lot of my writings are now becoming songs. We're actually going to be
Mm.
doing some albums. We're trying to craft albums that are based on the Beautiful Soul series.
Oh.
My hope
How
is to
cool is
give away
that?
the music for free, just to be inspirational. So nature, music, and writing. I love to write, and I have a couple of people, that are in a tribe.
Mm.
That's how I refer to them. So just being able to have them in my life, and go to a deeper level and have a safe space. It's a rarity. I have a lot of people in my life, but there's a difference between having lots of friends and having like that inner tribe that you can go to these deep spiritual places with. So I cherish them with all my heart. So yeah, those are things that I do to stay grounded. And then the usuals, videos and books, and you know being aware that everything is happening for me and not to me, is
Mm.
also a way to stay grounded. That's one of my mottos I've been practicing, especially, in the work that I do in education, where, my passion is wanting to transform the system, but I use education as the path to do what we're talking about, to help people remember who they are, right?
Mm.
To help people see that they matter just for breathing, and that they have a light, inside of them. And that will challenge you, like, on every level, right? So like practicing that model, like, when I cross paths with a broken system in our world, to be like, this is happening for me. This is not happening to me.
Mhm.
That's really important.
Yeah.
All of that grounds me. They become my biggest teachers, my students, other educators. It's awesome.
Oh, agreed. Agreed. During the holidays, are there times that you want to chuck a loved one out a window?
Sadly, yes.
If so, we think that it would benefit you to check out our Healthier Relationships course.
If you or a loved one have anxiety or even fear going into the holidays with the interaction with family members or others, that it may be problematic. We really think this course, which we put a lot of work into at My Inner Knowing, could be helpful for you in becoming less reactive and more intentional, and help you set some boundaries going forward in your relationship.
We hope you'll give it a try.
And we're offering 25% off for this holiday season. So gift it to yourself or gift it to a loved one.
Yeah, we hope you'll join us. Thanks.
So in education, just to step down that path, since it's a big part of you, right? Number one, what led you to that space?
I'm laughing because there should be some profound like wisdom answer to that. But the truth is, it was to impress a girl.
That's great.
It happens. It happens.
Oh yeah. I met a girl. She was in a community service, social service agency. She was working with kids. She said, "Come down, work with the kids." I wanted a date, so I was like, "Sure."
So what changed for you in that process?
I connected with those kids.
Yeah.
I know, and I realized the system that had failed me was still failing them, and it was worse than ever. When I was a kid, I was the kid that was bullied every day, beat up in the schoolyard. I had a group of kids that had surrounded me, and they took my head and they smashed it into a stone wall while they were chanting "Stupid Jew, stupid Jew," and the school didn't do anything to support me. So I felt that was one of those spiritual moments, that I felt like what's happening, like I don't understand this. The life is not supposed to be like this. And fast forward, when I was trying to impress that girl, I ended up getting a job at that agency, and they placed me in a school system. And I said, "That's funny. I spent my whole life trying to get out of school. The universe put me right back in there."
Yeah.
So, and that just opened up a whole world. I was one of those kids too. I couldn't wait to get out of. I wasn't going to college or anything. But that led me to take a college class, because I was like, "Oh, maybe I'll go into social work." And I was like, "What do I need to go into social work?" And this girl said a college degree. And I was like, "Oh, I guess I'm not going to be a social worker." But then I took a class again to impress her, and I just fell in love. I was in a different place in my life, and I was like, "Oh, wow, I'm actually learning something, and I could do something with this." So it was a means to an end. Is that the right saying? Like, it was like, it brought me on this path. And then I became president of the Social Worker Council. And then it was just like, then the vision opened up, and I was like, oh, let me just help people be the best versions of themselves. But it was also healing me. I was giving people a voice through my programs and platforms, but I hadn't fully found my voice yet. So it was kind of this mutual, like, I was doing all these great things for all these years, but it was healing me at the same time. But yeah, the more I went through the system, the more programs I did, the more schools I worked with, it just kept opening up opportunities. And that eventually came to this realization of, what if we had an education that awakens souls instead of numb them? And that it took me 17 years to get to that realization, though, right? To realize that's my purpose. That's what I want to create in this world. Easy. Yeah.
It is.
Easy piece,
it's a simple goal. You should have it completed by next year.
So
yeah, absolutely.
Dive
on
right in on
list.
that. From my inner knowing perspective, when you realized that's my purpose.
Yeah.
What was that like for you? Was there an internal process going on? Do you check in inside? How did you know?
Yeah. I needed to do a tremendous amount of self-development work.
Yeah.
I I was at the point of burnout when I was figuring out that message, and I connected with a self-development. I've done a lot of self-development work through different programs and companies, and paid lots of money and little money, and all these I tried out there, whatever's out there. I've tried it. And then I got connected with this company in Toronto called the Passion Center, and they were a self-development organization as well, but they had a different perspective. And then they led me through this journey of figuring out what drives me, and also what holds me back. What was that, that internal painful lessons as a child that I had that was creating, these life lessons, sometimes unhealthy life lessons to move forward. So through all of that work, that had really helped to awaken me to be like, these are the things that drive me. So now, like, I need to look at my life and be like, is what I'm doing aligned to what really drives my passion? And if it isn't, I now have a knowledgeable choice to separate from that, right? So for example, I love doing visionary work, but I love being in action about it, right? So I'm a visionary in action. That's one of my passion drivers, right? So now if I'm in a school system and they don't let me create a program, or they don't allow me to have a voice, I can be like, well, now I have this language. Like, this is not aligned to who I am. So, I have a choice. Do I stay here? Do I not stay here? And, can I get alignment? Right. So that's kind of what that journey was like. I'm about connections, being inspired through those connections. And then the big thing was higher consciousness, which is what you read in the beginning with the bio. It's wanting to be in a place where people are learning how to be the best versions of themselves through higher consciousness education. And that's just a fancy way of saying that people are like, oh no, you can't bring God or, spirituality into education. And I'm like, that's not what it is. It's really just awakening people to be the best versions of themselves, to see that their life matters. Just like that lady told me when I was 17, after I crashed into the concrete wall, like, your life matters. Everybody's life matters. So yeah. So it's a practice.
Yeah.
Lots of practice.
Did I answer the question? I don't know.
You did.
Okay. I love to talk, obviously.
We do too, Hal. What do you think have been the most helpful things for you in supporting yourself? Like, are you someone that does more daily practices? Do you step away from your life and go on retreat ever? Like, how is it that you care for yourself?
That's a great question. Still learning that balance for sure. I was just saying yesterday, I was having a conversation that I'm in a really great place with my diagnosis, better than I have been in the last 7 years. And I feel really, really strong and healthy. And my benchmark for that, sadly, is that I'm at full tilt and I'm running the schedule that I did, 10, 15 years ago. And I'm like, Hal, that's what got you sick in the first place, right? So I have that awareness now, right? So now the lesson comes to find the answer to what you just asked me. I love to travel. You know,
Mm.
I love to see the world, and I do build that into my schedule. I've done quite an extensive amount of traveling
Mhm.
the past couple of years, and I try to go to places where I'm curious, about things that may be aligned to supporting that journey. Like, I just went to Costa Rica. It was
Mhm.
breathtaking. A lot of people have said to me, "You have to go to Costa Rica. You're on this
Mhm.
spiritual journey." Somehow Costa Rica became aligned with people's spiritual, like, you know. I don't know where that started, but oh, you're on a spiritual journey. Have you been to Costa Rica? I was like,
That's
right. But I'm taking my niece to Amsterdam
Mm.
this summer for her 21st birthday, and I happen. Well, this is also the universe as well. I believe this is divine intervention. I got a call like about a month and a half ago, and they were like, "Hey, Hal, we've got some educators coming in from Amsterdam. Could you do a presentation for that?" So I in Queens, where I live in New York.
Yeah.
So I went down and I did this presentation. And I said, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to be in Amsterdam in July." And they were like, "Oh, come visit our schools." So
Oh,
now we've got this whole program where I'm going to be going into their schools while I'm there, on vacation.
nice.
But that's what I love. Like, I love
Mm.
when I did work in Nigeria. I love, and in Haiti, one of my favorite, like, we did great education stuff, but one of my
Mhm.
favorite moments in both those countries was learning about their culture and how they pray and what they do for being grounded and having their moments every day. And
Mhm.
I felt like I was so blessed to have those moments, and those are the things that I look to do for balance. um I my music is so important to me. Like, so I make sure that that's incorporated into every day to help support me and keep
Mm.
me level. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Like you said, music. Mm. Our body feels it. Well,
Mm,
maybe not all of us, but yeah, but very deeply.
yeah.
Yeah.
Music
Walker.
is the language of the soul. That's what I always say. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can help us support us and it can keep us heavy too. Walker and I, when we're facilitating a retreat, talk about playlists often, ask people to review their playlist and, you know, what is it that they're listening to and what stories are they reinforcing to themselves?
It's so funny. When I was in the beach in Costa Rica, um, my spiritual practice there was creating playlists. I
Oh,
I geek out on creating I have playlists for different people in my life, different
yeah.
moments in my life. It's like, I tell people it's the mixtape syndrome. When I was 7 years old and poor, I got the little tape deck, and I was waiting on the radio to hit record
Oh,
so I could get my
nice.
favorite song. And then you'd be like,
oh,
"Oh, I've got like 30 songs on a little tape," and you play it like,
yeah.
Casey Kason's countdown over and over again.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow, Hal.
Fascinating. I
Yeah.
think it's a book idea.
Yeah.
Maybe, yes.
I
I could see
think
the
it's
book cover
really
could be a
cool.
tape deck.
Yeah.
We could add that to the list of books afterwards.
Number 8.
Yeah. Are there specific resources? I mean, you mentioned the Passion Center in
Yeah.
Canada. Are there other resources that you feel like have been particularly supportive of you on your journey?
Oh my God, so many. I mean, you know, I think life itself has been the best resource. You know,
Mm,
the experiences that I've gone through, my students that I work with day in and day out, they
mhm,
teach me as much as I as I try to teach them. When you're awakened to being present, that, again, going back to that saying, everything's happening, for you, not to you, and that, um, everything's okay. Like, everything's just okay, right? And you're just on this journey. All of a sudden, it's not like a teacher-student relationship as society. It becomes a mentor-mentor relationship. Without them necessarily realizing that every time they come in to share about their experience or a struggle that they're having, and you have the opportunity to sit in front of them and inspire them and explore with them, it's this beautiful exchange that challenges me at times, and I'm looking at what's going on in society with different people and different experiences. And I'm like, wow, the same philosophy is there, right? Like, there are a different place on their journey, but now I'm here experiencing, like, okay, what does this mean for them on their journey, and how does it connect to me on my journey? And then I really geek out and I think about the whole system that surrounds them. When I was in school and I learned systems theory, um, I felt like I was learning spirituality for the first time. It was like, there's all these levels. We all have different relationships and different moments and it all interacts and combines into this complex, like, network. And it's quite beautiful, right? Like, so I think that's been my biggest teacher. But of course, like, I refer to, for my health journey, I referred a lot to Louise Hay. I listened to Abraham a lot. Abraham speaks to me. Esther Hicks, just what a phenomenal, like, beautiful, beautiful gift. And it seems like every time I'm challenged and need to get grounded and back, um, Abraham Esther Hicks has the right video that pops up. And then I have other spiritual mentors that I've met along the way, healing practitioners, alternative medicine practitioners, shamans that have guided me and coached me and supported me. The healing journey is all about, um, and cancer. Everyone's scared of this word cancer. It's a society message, right? But what I discovered is, all cancer is blocked energy in your body. Most illness, I think, is blocked energy in your body, right? Which, from a spiritual perspective, makes sense. But then the question becomes, well, how do you unblock that energy, right? Illness can't survive in an environment of love, right? Right. So learning how to fully love yourself and have that love flowing through you, well, then illness can't survive, right? So having these mentors along the way that have taught me that and supported that and have helped me to unravel those mysteries and those pains and make it sound like, oh yeah, this is super easy. It has not been easy at all. It has been some of my darkest moments. Dark night of the soul is a real thing.
It is a real thing.
Yes. And dark night doesn't mean one night, by the way. Dark night could be like, I was like, my dark night of the soul lasted 2 years. So
Yeah. Oh.
Truth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we want it to be so simple. But
we do. I'm not sure we'd learn if it was, right?
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
That's the beauty of it, I guess.
Yeah. So, Hal, I know we're going to be wrapping up in a few minutes, and the time always goes by so fast. What things would you like to share with our listeners?
I think the first thing is that their life matters. If I think the universe speaks to each of us through so many different mediums, so if they happen to fall upon your podcast in this conversation, just to be aware that they're supposed to hear this conversation. And I don't know it. I always go back to that lady who opened up her door, the greatest part of that experience
Mhm.
is I don't know her name and I don't remember the house,
Wow.
right? But because she took a chance on some 17-year-old kid at 2:00 in the morning,
Mhm.
that 17-year-old kid has reached, almost 1 million people through his projects and
Wow.
programs. And she'll never know that, right?
Mm.
So you never know how one moment, and I will never know who's
Mhm.
listening to our
Mhm.
conversation,
Right.
So if they hear, just to be aware that they were called here for a reason. It's because, their life matters, and then if they want to dive deeper, they can always reach out to me. I love speaking to anybody.
Mm.
My website is, haleisenberg.com. I've got the 5 books. Well, no, 6 books. Going on 7. The reason I forgot that 6th book, that SEL book, that came from a project that I was doing for a school. And
Mm.
they asked me to come up with a little guide, a pocket guide, so teachers can take from classroom to classroom,
Mm.
to have little icebreakers on SEL is social emotional learning, right?
Right.
Which is a watered down term in education. It's a whole other soapbox. I won't get into that right now, right? But like, teachers needed like just something that they can take that could, they can do in the classroom really, really quick. And it's designed to
Mm.
check in with kids and make kids feel valued for who they are. So
Mm.
I came up with a little guide, and it's 101, SEL lessons in the classroom, but then in parentheses it says 202 because each one of those lessons has an alternative way to do it. So
Awesome.
yeah, so and it's a little pocket guide. I totally forgot about that. But my next book is actually goes deeper into transforming education. It's actually inspired a little bit by Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Mm.
I love Campbell's version of those books. So it's like it's using stories of students that I've worked with. I had to narrow down
Mm.
from almost 1 million people to 50 of my favorite stories, and
Mm.
aligning their stories to how we can transform the system, so that book is coming out, and there's going to be some more books down the road.
Mm.
Yeah. So
Yay.
Wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for it all. So yeah, if
Yeah.
anybody's interested in learning more, they can go to the website, reach out to me. I'm an open book. No pun intended.
Mm.
or pun intended.
Yeah. Nice.
Thank you, Hal.
Thanks, Hal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really, really nice to get to know you a little bit and appreciate your time and your wisdom.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is I was sharing with somebody. I don't usually get nervous on podcasts anymore,
Mm.
but I was a little nervous this morning because I was like, these people are the real deal. I'm like, and then I just took a breath and I was like, no, I said, this is happening for us all. So like, just let's be
Mm.
present. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Good.
thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
Thank you. Yeah. We all we can do is to be present for ourselves and for you. And we know how much story impacts us. And your willingness to share some of your story will impact people. And you know that. And so we just feel honored that our listeners get to hear part of your story. So thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to explore life with you. We encourage curiosity, self-growth, and we strive to be more compassionate every day.